Hey everyone, this is Aliana with Brands Are Alive, and in today's video I want to talk to you about the concept of the business artist or the rise of the business artist. What is a business artist? How do you know that you are or may be a business artist? And I'm gonna, as a bonus, add the one thing that makes a huge difference in your creativity. In fact, I believe it's the key difference between people who are slightly or even very creative versus people who are described as creative geniuses. And it's probably not something you've heard anywhere because I did not refer to any experts in creativity or consultants or studies or anything like that. I just looked at nature. So let's talk about this. All right, what is a business artist? Well, for starters, it's not people who are selling an art, at least in the traditional sense of the word. So it's not necessarily a painting or music that you're selling or anything that's considered stereotypically, a piece of art. But I think Andy Warhol is the first person to coin it back in the 60s or 70s. And, we saw that the traditional business people, the people who are consumed with the bottom line, and the traditional artist, the starved artist, or at least the stereotype, both of these are dying down, and instead there is a merge between these two. And this is actually nothing new. And a little known fact is that the stereotype of the starving artist actually, although it is rooted in some reality, of course there are lots of artists who are starved out, but someone like Michelangelo actually would have been a millionaire or multi-millionaire by today's standards, and he was a very, very wealthy person, and many artists made a lot of money. So there was nothing wrong with that. It's just that some artists sold out by creating fake pieces of art for politicians. So like in the Roman times and the Greek times, these politicians would get these artists to paint them chiseled and like very attractive on their horses with like a 12-pack, fighting for the freedom of their nations. And the reality is they were like at least 150 pounds overweight, drinking wine all the time, with their sex slaves and whatnot. But I digress. I'm not, by the way, like jabbing at any particular civilization or anything. I'm just saying that was, I guess you could say, the beginning of false advertising, is that artists sold out. Signs that you are or maybe a business artist. Well, the most obvious one is creativity, but that's not enough because a lot of people are creative. Actually, everyone is a creative. It's just that some people are more uninhibited than others. But you may be a business artist if you are someone who A, craves excellence. You are obsessed with your work, with your craft. You take it very seriously, and even if the person who is buying it thinks it's okay or passable, you take it very seriously. That has to be up to a certain standard. 2, you crave creating unique and elevating experiences. You're hungry for something different in your field. 3, you need creative freedom. Like, you don't just need a little bit of creativity, you need complete autonomy and freedom to do your work as creatively as you want to. And if somebody tells you what to do or how to do it, you feel not too great. You get frustrated. 4, you get frustrated when you have to work on things that are part of a to-do list that is not the thing that you love doing. It's like you have this hyper focus on the things that you enjoy doing and everything else is a distraction. As a matter of fact, you might actually want to make more money just because you want money to not be a problem so that you could spend more of your time doing what you love. 5, I think, I lost count. You hate the feeling of compromising on what and who you think you are for profit. And here I'm not talking about ethics and morality or anything like that. You just don't want to be told what to be and who to be. Like, you have this sense of freedom about you, and you hate being controlled, stifled. You feel like you could just explode. This ties into the need for creative freedom. And so part of it is, if somebody tells you that you can't be this or you can't do this, it bothers you tremendously because it's part of who you are, it's part of what you are. And even if you don't identify as a creative person, you just feel like something isn't right. And the biggest sign of all that you are probably a business artist through and through is that you can't help but create a unique signature style for yourself in your work. There's something about the way that you do your work that nobody else does. And even if you haven't developed it yet, you crave it so much that you're on the path to creating it. So if you think about it, you cannot be an artist, period, if you don't have a signature style. I mean, try to think of a painter who is very good at what they do, but all they do is they look at the world's best paintings and then they recreate them. And it doesn't matter how good they are, what they do, and how well they recreate them, or how great of a talent they have. If it doesn't have something unique of themselves, if it doesn't have their signature on it, it doesn't matter. I think you can agree that you can't call that a piece of art. And where that signature style thing comes from is it comes from embracing different parts of oneself. It comes from embracing these different parts that don't make sense and mixing them in such a unique way that it becomes impossible to replicate because there's only one of you. And I'm going to use Frida Kahlo as an example because she did such a great job at this. I was looking at her portraits and paintings in general, and I wouldn't call myself a connoisseur by any stretch of the word, but it's pretty easy when you look at her paintings. If you see something that's not hers, you can tell that that's not made by her, even though it's very well made. The person who recreated it did such a great job at it, but you can feel that something isn't there. And even in her physical appearance and the way she lived her lifestyle, she had a very unique style. She often exaggerated her unibrow and her facial hair in her paintings. I actually had no idea until I saw her photographs. I was like, wow. Turns out she was playing with the duality of the masculine and feminine, which I thought was absolutely fucking genius. I love this woman. And the way that she presented herself, it wasn't part of a brand or anything. It was just her playing with this character, right? Like she was bringing more of herself in what she was creating. And the genius of this is I think she really understood that full self-expression, it shows up in your work. You can't stifle yourself and be boxed and square in your daily life in other areas and then expect that somehow you're going to sit on your desk and you're going to turn into this creative genius. It doesn't work that way. You have got to practice this in every other area so that when it comes time to do the work, right? When it comes time to do that, it really feels like play because you're just playing, and it's just an extension of who you are. And I think that's the key to this creative genius. And so to allow yourself to bring out more of this business artist is you have to take full ownership of who you are and bring all of it into everything that you create. You have got to own your creative genius. And you have to stop trying to be consistent with the identities that you create for yourself throughout life and instead focus on experiencing more of the unlimited being, who's constantly changing and evolving. And here I want to talk about the one key difference between people who are very creative versus these creative geniuses, right? That I talked about in the beginning of the video. And that key difference, you'll understand, is actually something that's fundamental to creativity and creation. So the creation cycle is in 3 stages. Like I said, I didn't want to look at what anybody thinks or what anybody says. Instead, looked at nature. And nature creates in 3 stages. There is the creation, there's the sustaining of the creation, and then there's the destruction. And ancient Vedic systems and lots of Eastern philosophies also talk about this. I believe it's because they've observed the same things, because that's how nature is. Everything that's ever been created has been created in these 3 steps: create, sustain, destroy. And we love to create and sustain, but when it comes to destroying, we have a really hard time. We don't have a hard time destroying other people and their property and their things, but we have a hard time, a lot of people unfortunately don't, but we have a hard time destroying what is ours, especially when it gets attached to our identity that we hold on to so dearly. And destruction is not a bad thing, right? Like you have to let go of what is no longer working so that you can open up the space and emptiness for something else to emerge. Because it's more efficient and effective sometimes, a lot of times, to start from emptiness than to keep building on top of what is no longer working. But the reason why we have a hard time letting go is because we get so comfortable in the safety of thinking that we are, safe, and we know what to expect. We have this identity, we have this location, we know what we're doing for a living, we know what kind of relationships we're in. We just get very, very comfortable and safe and cozy. And then when it's time to let go, even though we know that this thing has long passed its expiration date, but we keep holding on to it and hoping that somehow it's going to change. Or we come up with excuses as to why we can't let it go. And often we have a hard time even admitting to ourselves, right? We don't even allow ourselves to let it go. We say that, yeah, but there is an excuse for why. And often this leads us to creating the wrong things for the wrong reasons and keeping them even though they are completely out of alignment. So we create things because we are uncomfortable with not having the things. So for example, we don't know what kind of business we want to have. but we know we want to have a business and we know we want to make more money, so we just create whatever and hope that someday we're going to have an epiphany. Instead of actually facing ourselves and working through stuff, we just kind of do whatever, right? Or we just feel like we have to fill the blank with a relationship, or we have to fill the blank with an answer. This is a big one. Like, we hate having unanswered questions, so we fill in the blank with any answer better than no answer at all. And really, we have to get comfortable with that emptiness, because between create, sustain, destroy, it's not an immediate create. There is often a gap. And that gap is where a lot of people feel very uncomfortable, especially when it pertains to identity. Like, you get so attached to who you think you are, and you have a hard time letting go. And what creative geniuses know is that I am no one. And so I'm free. I can experiment and play. I'm not attached to any particular identity. I am just following the flow, following the bliss, whatever feels great, whatever makes me feel alive. I'm doing that. And in doing that, I am creating more and I'm forming more of a new identity, but I'm playing. This is just a character. I am playing a game. We're all playing a game. I'm just being more mindful and conscious of it than other people. So that's the idea. And the thing I want you to know about destruction and letting go of things is that if you don't let it go gracefully, life will take it away anyway. But it will be more painful when it's been taken away, because it would have taken a lot more space in your life when it didn't need to, and it would have caused more pain than it needed to. And two, often what happens is if you didn't let it go and it was taken away, it's more painful because people usually make it mean something about themselves. And it doesn't have to, but that's what usually happens. So the key is to learn to let go of things when you feel like it's time to let go. And there's a key difference between destroying things for the sake of destroying them versus letting go. And I know I said destroy, and that is what it is really, but it shouldn't feel like an energy of destroying. Anytime you feel like you're destroying the status quo, or you're just, I'm disrupting the space. I hear this all the time in business. Take a step back and think about that. And it's not because I don't like confrontation. You should have met me a few years ago. I was probably the most confrontational person I've ever met. I was incredibly confrontational. It's not because I'm afraid of it or because I think it's, you can't handle it or anything, or it's none of that. It's because when you destroy the status quo just because you don't like it, because you want to, there's an element of anger, lack of love and acceptance in what you're trying to destroy, let go of, you end up becoming what you hate. A prime example of this is Apple. When Apple started, you might have seen their advertisement from the 80s. When their ad came out in 84, it was a direct jab at Microsoft. It was like, we are just the exact opposite. And I think they had the right intentions, right? I do love a lot about Apple. This video is shot on an iPhone. I have my notes on a Mac, so just so you know, okay? I love the products. I love Steve Jobs. There's a lot to say about that guy. He knew stuff. I could make videos to talk about Steve Jobs, but different topic for a different day. But there was an element of anger towards Microsoft and non-acceptance of Microsoft and wanting to destroy Microsoft. So guess what happened? Apple became Microsoft. Okay, and we see this all the time in politics. We see it even in kids and teenagers becoming their parents. They'll complain, mom and dad, and then they become adults and then they act exactly like their parents. That's exactly what it is. You become the thing that you reject. And so it's not about fighting the status quo and destroying it so that we can know. You love and accept what is. You see the lessons that have to be learned, and you let it go gracefully. So it shouldn't feel like you're destroying something. It should feel like you're letting go with love. Wishing it all the best. Thank you for the lessons. Thank you. I love you. Goodbye. That's what it should feel like. Of course, that's easier said than done sometimes, but that's what we aim for, right? And so to wrap up, the fundamental question I want you to ask yourself here is, are you seeking to be consistent with an identity, or are you seeking to experience the freedom of the being that you are? Are you trying to be consistent with who you think you should be, or are you wanting to experience more of aliveness? A prime example of this is what I did in the past when I realized that I was no longer happy in my last business. an e-commerce marketing expert. I was a retention marketing expert. I was a brand loyalty expert. I derived so much of my comfort and security and confidence and financial comfort and everything and nice words and compliments and all of that. I got all of that from this knowledge, from this expertise, and from being told over and over that I was so good at it. I felt very confident talking about it, creating work around it, but I wasn't resonating with it. But I kept doing it because I didn't know what else to do, and I felt that this at least makes money, and it's better than not knowing what to do. It's better than being lost. And two, I was very comfortable, like I said. And so when I started thinking, okay, well, what do I want to do? I started thinking about all these dots, trying to connect them and create something out of it. And I think this is what they talk about when they talk about thinking outside the box. Is I was in the box and I'm thinking, okay, within the confinements of who I think I am and everything I've invested so much of my time and energy into and everything I'm so good at, realistically, what's the best I can create out of this? Instead of just saying, you know what, forget about all that. Let's go back to zero. From an empty cup, what is it that I would love to create? What do I desire to create? What would make me feel alive? That's a very different question. It's a very different energy. So yeah, that's my advice to you. Get out of your head, because life is meant to be experienced. And if you're having trouble with letting go of an identity and you're stuck in who you think you are, I think you'll probably definitely actually benefit from sacred plant medicine, because I know, as much as I've done a lot of work in many different areas with lots of modalities, but sacred plant medicine is what helped me the most. And it helped me so much that I decided I had to bring it into my practice and into our work. So within the first session, I started to let go of some of who I thought I was. And I can tell you I've done a lot of it. I started a few years ago, and I've done many, many sessions, but you probably don't even need that much. I've seen people experience dramatic transformations within 1 or 2 sessions, and we usually have multiple sessions in our programs. So that's something I highly recommend, along with taking time for yourself to step away from the world and really checking into yourself. I always tell people, first thing you do in the morning is you take time away from everything and everyone before you get in the habit of who you're supposed to be and start your day as the person that you were yesterday. Take, even if it's like 1 minute or 5 minutes in the morning, to just close your eyes and check in with yourself and ask yourself, how are you feeling? Like, what's going on with you? And what really needs your attention? Not what we need your attention as far as like, what does the world need from you, but what do I need from myself? How can I serve you, myself, right? Like, you have to address yourself that way. And to remind yourself that you are really not the body and you are really not the mind. You are not who you think you are. So, thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.